Hello, it's Diana Dini. I want to invite you to this special episode where I am talking with Scott Abel. I asked Scott if I could interview him for the Quality During Design podcast because of his expertise in technical documentation and its relationship to the success of product designs. We had so much to talk about and so many things to discover that I broke our interview up into two parts. You're listening to part one of our conversation, where we really talk about information development management practices. He's with us here today to share ideas, strategies, and best practices for unifying all product information in a single online knowledge center. And this includes technical documentation, product specifications, customer support, training, and onboarding. After this part one of our interview, you'll understand why technical documentation is more important than it's generally treated, and how it affects regulated products, and why future fear of noncompliance is a trap that can lead to a loss of information management advancements and their benefits. We also talk about what object-oriented technical communication management is, and we explore more what the acronym COPE means. I will tell you more about Scott, and we'll get into our interview after this brief introduction. Hello and welcome to Quality During Design, the place to use quality thinking to create products others love for less. Each week we talk about ways to use quality during design engineering and product development. I'm Diana Dini. I'm a senior level quality professional and engineer with over 20 years of experience in manufacturing and design. Listen in and then join us. Visit qualityduringdesign.com. Welcome back. We're going to be talking with Scott Abel today. Let me tell you a little bit more about Scott. He has spent the better part of the past 2 decades advocating for the adoption of advanced information development management practices. Information development management is a discipline concerned with best practices for managing and coordinating all activities related to the development, production, and distribution of information. Scott has helped dozens of organizations around the world transform the way they produce product information by adopting a unified content strategy, a repeatable, scalable approach to creating, managing, and delivering product information. Organizations that put in place a unified content strategy are capable of delivering the right information to the right people and machines at the right place and time in the right languages and formats on demand and at scale. Hello, Scott. A warm welcome to you for joining the Quality During Design community.
Hey, thanks for having me today, Diana.
I'm glad to be talking to a technical communication expert, or you're an expert in the field of technical documentation. We talk about product design on the Quality During Design, and I think that you're going to be able to provide a lot of different perspectives on product design and product design engineering from your viewpoint. So I'm really looking forward to talking with you today about that.
Excellent. I am equally as excited. So let's do it.
We've been talking offline here, and you've spent the better part of the past 2 decades advocating for advanced information development management practices. And from what I've known from our conversations and our emails, is that this is a pretty broad and very important aspect of a product design that maybe product design engineers don't get to see or think about very often. Can you describe a little bit about what that is and what it entails?
Yeah, the documentation has primarily been thought of as a post-sale deliverable, and I'll translate that into content that's provided to consumers after they purchase a product.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it is thought of by the people who design products, not all, but some, as a necessary evil. It's something that they have to do. And, somebody will do it, a writer will do it. And it becomes kind of a task that doesn't have the same level of importance or scrutiny or governance or any of the other important things that we want to do when we try to efficiently and effectively design products. Yet there are also some companies who recognize that the content that they produce that helps people use the product is the product. Sometimes it is the product itself, the information. Other times it is useless to have a product without the information that you need. For example, a computer system. It's nice if you purchase one, but if you don't know how to implement it, that's not really going to bring you any value. So documentation has been thought of as this extra thing. And my argument has been that it's a business asset that has many, many, many ways of bringing a financial return back to the company, either through post-sale loyalty, keeping customers who have purchased our products happy so they think positively of our brand and they would like to return again to purchase other products. Or in the case of prospective customers who are looking for a solution to whatever problem they may have, be it a software solution or a consumer electronics product, a car or something else that you might talk about on your show. Those interactions that people have before they buy are often informed by searches that they do on the web, and Google likes to reward the searcher with relevant content about the product. And it turns out that when you publish a bunch of product information, including technical documentation, to the web, it's viewed as authoritative content by Google. It's also seen as relevant and loaded with keywords. So it's a great SEO tool to bring new potential prospects into a company. And the company then has an opportunity to make their products visible so that the prospective customer can be aware, right? And so without awareness, you can't develop an interest in the product and you can't purchase it. So technical documentation has been seen as this not so important thing, but it really is. For the success of the existing customer, for the loyalty of the customer to your brand, for attracting new audiences through organic search, and for providing confidence that the selection that a prospective customer might make to purchase your product was a good decision because they can kind of peer into your company and see if you care about them or not. Are you providing content that's useful and helpful to the audience that you're trying to attract?
Yes, and those are, you listed a lot of business assets there that this technical documentation can provide. And I can see myself when I'm searching for a product. Maybe it's because of my engineering background, but I look and I dig for that kind of information, and that does inform whether or not I make purchases. So the market asset I can definitely see, and it just being consumers of products, that seems more transparent. Like you can see yourself looking for that information and thinking that way about things. But also you mentioned that this type of communication can also be a design asset. So with product design engineers, at Quality During Design, we promote early cross-functional teamwork. Product design engineers reaching out and getting design inputs from marketing or from sales, from the supplier management people, and from quality and reliability. And I think technical documentation falls into that also. So have you been involved with new product development projects? If you can tell us about some of them that you might have been involved with and how you were able to work with the design team, or maybe you have a nightmare project that you've worked on that you really wish best practices had been followed instead.
Let me tell you about one that comes to mind off the top of my head that might resonate with some of your listeners. I worked at a pharmaceutical company. They're in the business of only developing products and selling products. They don't do anything else. Their goal is to have their products approved by regulators, and without that approval, they cannot sell their products legally anywhere in the world. So the design of a drug, right, is based on a lot of research, and it's expensive to do. And when they discover something new, they being pharmaceutical industry, the company that discovers it files a patent on that product. And assuming that the patent is approved, they have the life of the patent to protect their intellectual property. And that means that they need to get their drug approved and sell it and make as much money as possible before the patent runs out. When the patent runs out, competitors can jump in, grab all their research, make the drug without having to invest in having done any of that research or product development activities. And they can simply clone the product and make it generic, which is great for many reasons. So I'm not complaining about that. The difficulty is that the pharmaceutical company is seeking investment money from people to invest in product development. And the investors want to get a return on their development dollars. And so they want the company to be as effective and efficient as possible. And they want them to be able to submit the content to the regulators and get the drug approved as quickly as possible, because every single day that the drug is not approved and is not available for sale is the day that the patent expires another day sooner. So it's kind of a rush to get the most money value, right? Most sales value from a product before its patent expires. Content treated like a post-sale deliverable means that they would just make the product and then somebody would write some instructions and stick it in the package and call it a day and then send it off. But with the regulated products, the instructions are also having to be scrutinized by the regulators, which means that all the product packaging and all the instructions for use and all the warnings and all the training and anything that you have about your product also has to be approved, not just the fact that you've got a product and you want to sell it, but all the information has to run through a regulatory filter. When you have people who think about content as a necessary evil, they don't see the potential like the pharmaceutical company does. The pharmaceutical company knows that if we put this content together and get it to the regulators tomorrow, then the day after tomorrow, the regulators can start the process of slating in for review all of that information, and eventually the drug will be approved faster. Writers sometimes have challenges thinking like business people or thinking like product developers, for example, because we're often so attached historically to our grammar. That's our superpower, is our ability to communicate with words. And yet that's not the goal of the pharmaceutical company. We're not trying to produce lofty prose that's people are impressed by. We're trying to produce information that a regulator will approve a drug so they can start immediately selling it. Mm-hmm. In the pharmaceutical example, the product team is concerned about us getting done fast. So they just want us to shortcut things. They don't think it's important. But in the pharma company, they understand that it is important, because if you were to submit information that, let's say, had an inaccuracy. So let's say that in the new drug application, you claim that you discovered this product in the rainforest in some, remote place, and you found this plant that had this magical healing power, and you've turned it into a product, and you discovered it in 1988. But later in the same document, they reference 1989. The regulator could and has in the past said that's an incongruency or inconsistency that shouldn't be in there. We can't trust the validity of all of your information if you can't even get that right. So documentation has a lot of governance and a lot of scrutiny, and it's not just writers who are just typing some stuff and then pushing print. There's a large process involved in doing it. And in order to get it approved efficiently, the regulator has to be able to accommodate all of these submissions made by content people and product development teams at pharmaceutical companies. And so they had to develop a way to handle the content and to break up these big documents that we would send them. They were somewhere around 80,000 pages, and route the additional, whatever section of the document to each individual employee at the regulator who would look at them, because nobody's going to look at 80,000 pages, one person. So it breaks them up, and it requires us to do it in a very disciplined way, using technology and using standards and things of that nature that a lot of product development people don't even know we do. They, I think, sometimes think that we open a blank page and then we type some stuff. How hard can it be? That's totally not our job. Our job is really a lot of research. We have to write to a structure. We have to have other tools in our arsenal. We have to understand terminology and localization and cognitive neuroscience. And we have to understand how planning teams work, how product management works. And we have to kind of weasel our way in to a world in which product developers are trying to advance things like agile development methodologies. And then they want to chuck their product ideas over the fence to the writers without having them work in an agile way. So technical communicators are also scrum masters, right? We hold our own scrums. We participate in agile development, and we're on some development teams that are savvy enough to see that part of the product is the content. So that's one example. The horror story is when a company thinks that all the content that they have is sufficient because their employees read it and on the product development team, and they understand it. They go, yeah, sounds right to me. Then a real human reads it that's outside of the organization and can't understand any of the words because we are littering our stuff with jargon that all of us understand, but other people don't. And then the argument becomes, well, how hard is it for the consumer? They can just Google it. Yes, but they can Google it and find many different interpretations of the answer to the question that they want. We want them to have the precise answer that the brand producing the product wants to put out there. So there's a lot of work that goes into structuring our content, making it semantically rich and machine processable. It not only has to be human readable, but it has to be understandable by search engines, which is particularly important in a world where we have new tools like those introduced recently to us, like ChatGPT, which rely on cues hidden in the content in order to deliver value.
Yes, and your example was from the pharmaceutical industry, and my background is a lot of medical device, and it sounds very similar.
It is very similar. Let me
Yes.
segue to say that medical devices is also a specialty area of mine, and medical device is closer to technical writing than pharmaceutical writing. Pharmaceutical writing has so many potential risks involved with miscommunication, right? Because some of those products can kill you. So there's a lot of scrutiny. Medical devices also have some risks, but it is probably less risky to have to look up some information about your pacemaker and then call your doctor to get an appointment than it is to kind of tinker with something that's much more likely to hurt you. No one's actually asking you to repair your own pacemaker, right? That's not, there's no DIY site for that, hopefully. But the medical devices are governed and regulated in a way that's similar to pharma with less restrictions, but there's still restrictions nonetheless. And there are compliance spheres that the product manufacturers who work to design and build these medical device products are fully aware of. They have a fear of what's called future fear of non-compliance. I don't know if you've ever experienced this in your in your work in medical devices, but it's like, hey, we're doing things today the way we always have, and we're the second largest medical device company in the world. If we change and start doing things different, we have to go through compliance again. And what happens if we're found non-compliant? So let's just keep doing it the way we were doing it in 1970. And that's pretty much the way it is in many organizations today. It's less likely that they will be aware of the information management advances that have been made in the last couple decades and the benefits that it could provide all of their teams internally and externally if they just use science to think about the information. That's really my big argument, is that we should be evidence informed about our decisions. We shouldn't have the think and feel decision making that occurs on a lot of product teams.
Now, you kind of ended there with product teams, and you mentioned risk, and I want to loop back to that. But before we get there, what's the official title or the umbrella title of someone in your field? Is it technical communicator? Technical writer is common, but I think it's not as common anymore.
I don't think that there is one. My research has shown that people call themselves whatever they want to call themselves, and that companies actually don't really care. A lot of times it is a replacement for a raise. So some technical communicators, for example, the discipline of content strategy, which I'm a content strategist as well, has made its way into the business world. And so it would make sense that people who hear those two words, who are writers, think, I know what the word content means, and I know what the word strategy means. I create content, and of course, I do it strategically. So therefore, I am a content strategist.
Yes, okay.
So your question is, they call themselves anything. I call them information developers as a generic topic in order to accommodate marketing writers, technical writers, medical writers, and people who help with writing, editors, proofreaders, localizers, translators, information architects. They all kind of fit into that mold.
I like that term, the information developers. You've mentioned in projects that sometimes they are integrated within the project team and they're working alongside the project team members with the design and developing this information and these technical communication products as the product's being developed, and they have interactions with the team. And then there's also the aspect of, hey, you wrote something and this doesn't make a lot of sense. So there's also a sense of independence with these information developers. Do you find that technical communicators, do they have to walk that fine line between being in the thick of it, in the design, and being independent? Or is there more than one person that kind of picks that up? So there's really not a line that has to be walked, but just more than one person taking a look at what's being produced.
Yeah, I think there are lines, and it depends, right? Is the answer on what kind of company and what kind of management style you have in your culture, whether or not technical communicators are even involved in the process. So in some places, they're treated as, hey, we did this product, figure out how it works and explain it to my grandma.
Mm-hmm.
Get busy. While other companies and organizations integrate technical communicators onto the product development team. So they're there from day one. And that's the argument most consultants will make, is that you should have them there from day one because they'll be intimately involved and working alongside you. Now, most of my experience recently in the last 10 years or so were with software as a service, software developers and engineers. So they're developing digital products, and they often follow agile development methodology.
Mm-hmm.
And so on the teams where technical writers are embedded, they're all working together so that the product is being documented while it's being created. So they're involved in the sprint, they're involved in all of the activities. So the technical writers become very useful because sometimes they'll say, hey, in the last version of the product, when we wrote about this thing that you just reused from a previous version of our product, we got tons of support calls. And I talked to the support manager, and they said that when we said it a different way, fewer people called. Let's stop using that word. So you may learn from having a technical writer embedded on a team things from their experience because they're constantly customer focused. Other times, they're in their own department. Let's say the technical documentation department, or maybe some kind of information management team. And they get brought in to work with the teams as they're developing their products. And developers sometimes feel, software developers in particular, sometimes feel like that is wasteful because they would prefer to be having the developers write all the documentation, even though developers, when you talk to them, they don't really want to do that because they enjoy solving problems with code. Mm-hmm. And they may not be that good of a writer. So having somebody on the outside that comes in helps them in one respect, but hinders them in another. Sometimes the architects and developers of the products say, I spend 40% of my time now explaining to a technical writer rudimentary concepts from software development that all my developers already understand. So they don't always see the value of having somebody embedded, so they keep them kind of on the side. And then there's a third kind of role that some companies adopt where marketing needs to know what product development's doing, right? Because they have to eventually market and sell the product. Mm-hmm. And so they sometimes attend meetings too. So now you have people that are foreign to the development of the actual product, the people who are going to market it and the people who are going to document it on your teams. And so one approach has been, let the marketers stay in their office and not have to attend any of these meetings. Instead, send the technical writers to the meeting and make them part of the team and make part of their job to translate what the developers of the products are saying in their developmentese, right? The languages that they use to describe what they're building. And then to tell marketing, here are the 3 things in the meeting that occurred that you need to know about. So they become kind of translators internally. So they can fill different roles and become very valuable for a product development team because of their experience.
So I'm hearing you say that the information developers, they sort of are the bridge between the technical product development. They're very user focused, so they're like a translator for the user and how they approach things and look at things. And they also translate things for marketing. Did I get that right?
Yeah, it's kind of like they have to serve internal and external audiences, because if we put a group of people together and say, you guys are going to develop a product, that group of people are going to develop familiarity with one another. and habits, right, of sharing information in a specific way and using specific words, and eventually they all get it. And so it becomes hard for them sometimes to explain to somebody like a technical writer what needs to be explained in a way that the technical writer can grab onto it and then translate that into meaningful language that's customer focused, whoever the customer is, an internal person or an external person. Mm-hmm. That challenge isn't always showcased. That's one of their big things that they can do, is they can help you become better communicators. Now, we don't necessarily want to make developers of products be writers, but in some instances, there are developers of products who can write well. It's just that they're two different disciplines and they cross, each other. And there's some reasons to understand one another, but they are very different. For example, sometimes a software developer might say to a content person, we reuse our software code. So if we develop a way to write some code that allows you to use our software to print something, every time the print button is enabled on that software, we use the same code. It's called object-oriented programming. We write the code once and we use it in many places, but it's the same code over and over again. Well, writers do the same thing. We write a product description and then we repurpose it in multiple places. But we don't do what developers think we do. I mean, some writers do, but more modern information management focused writers do not do copy and paste, for example. We write something once, we give it a name, it has a unique identifier, and then we call it. Whenever we're writing a document, we pull in the pieces that are already pre-written. That assures us that we have one product description. So it's write it once, use it many times, or it's also called, sometimes referred to as COPE, which is create once, publish everywhere. And the idea there is that you have one single source of truth. So if you have one product description and the product changes, you change the product in one place, and everywhere that description was used that it's linked to will change automatically if it's a deliverable that can be changed. Obviously, a PDF is a picture of an image, right? We can't change that. But we could change anywhere that's digital. So if you had your product description on 15 different web properties and in a training section, in a documentation area, and in a marketing site, you could change it in one place and have it change and be accurate everywhere. But in order to do that, technical communicators have to do a lot of pre-work. We have to build models. We have to model the content. We have to structure it in a way that the computer understands. So it's not about choosing fonts or decorating the document. It's about making it machine readable and understandable by Google and by chatbots and by others. And in order to do all that, we have to know a lot about the product, and we have to push back sometimes and say, wait a minute, why are you doing it this way? You're making it more complicated for us downstream. And we also know things about what happens to our content after we are done with it. So after a writer is done with it, it has to go to localization and translation, especially in a medical device company where you're probably selling your device across borders to people who speak other languages, or even internally in your own country. The United States is a great example. You may have 10 different languages that you'll need to support in order to do that. And it's not sufficient to just add more people to your staff. You can't scale that way. And so our discipline of information development is really about how do we most efficiently and effectively produce this information, be capable of updating it, maintaining it, publishing it, delivering it, augmenting it for other people, sharing it, remembering it, personalizing it. Like there's just so many things that we do that we're much like product developers and engineers, but for content.
Yes, and I think a lot of the listeners will be able to identify with how you describe that information development management, which is what you're really, really promoting.
Yeah.
And that's interesting to hear how it's modular. And I like the COPE acronym too. You said it was create once, publish everywhere?
Everywhere. Yeah. It's actually based on a thing called the Unified Content Strategy, which was invented by a person called Anne Rockley. Rockley. She wrote a book in 1999 that I edited for her called Managing Enterprise Content, a Unified Content Strategy, where she proposed that we treat content like code, or manage it in the way that the engineers are managing their code and their project plans modularly. And so we identified these and named these little pieces of modular content components. And now there's an entire industry called component content management. So there are component content management systems. They're specifically designed to manage all the little pieces and then weave them together into deliverables on demand. So when somebody hits your website and they own a product, let's say you sell 3 different products, but they've only purchased one of those products. You can know that, right? Because you know you sold that to that person. And when they log into their account, you can serve up just the information that's relevant to the product that they own. Now, they can still find information about your other products that they don't own because you might want to sell them to them. But that's a different intent. When the person who comes to your website is looking for information about a product they own, it's usually because they can't figure out how to do something with it and they have a question. And nobody wants to call support. This is a huge thing. And by the way, consumers hate calling support, so much so that I did a survey of 1,000 consumers with SurveyMonkey, and we asked the question, and the question asked how people felt about calling support. And one of the questions that we added for drama was, you would rather do what? I would rather do X than call support. And it was like 60% of the people would rather clean the toilet than call support, right? When given a choice. And the reason that they give when you dig deeper is because the support agents are reading a script and they're being walked through a bunch of not very personalized experiences. Now, this may not be the case if you call it, Apple or somebody who's good at it. But if you call the average company, especially cable companies, utilities, anything that we have to deal with on a daily basis, they are just not good at it. Banks, all of them, they just really have room for improvement. And it's often because they've never componentized their content. So they have documents and they wrote a document, let's say a specific document aimed at a specific purpose for a specific audience. And you might be kind of sort of in that audience, but maybe you straddle a different audience, or maybe you're looking at it from an vantage point they've never thought of. So those companies don't have the ability to rearrange their information modules, which we call components, and deliver the information you need in the way that you need it, because they can't scale. They haven't, by creating documents instead of content, they are limiting their deliverability and they're limiting the ability to personalize the experience. And we all know that consumers hate customer support. And we also know that leaders of companies hate paying for it. So the solution is usually, let's put all the content on the web and then people can self-serve themselves, which is a great idea if you know how to do it. But most companies don't. They simply say, we have a library of PDFs and now we've made them all available on one page. Not very useful. Hidden in that 80-page PDF is maybe the answer to my question. But first I have to find it. Then I have to find the PDF. Then I have to download the PDF or search the PDF or print the PDF or read the PDF, right? It's not the same thing as asking your talking device for an answer to a question. So consumers are being habituated, right? We are accustomed to the drive-through window mentality for everything. I ordered some stuff from Staples that was delivered within an hour, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So now consumer demand is, I want the information about your product and I expect you to be able to give it to me in a format that's appropriate for wherever I am. I may be on a mobile device. I may be inhibited by some kind of temporary disability or a permanent disability. I may have a language barrier. I may only have 5 seconds or 5 minutes. I may be in crisis, right? All of these things we have to do, we have to prepare for, and we have to be able to provide the content at the moment that's needed. It's called the right information to the right person at the right time, in the right format, in the right language. And here's the kicker, on the device of that person's choosing. So you don't even get to choose, right? So you have to prepare all of these for all of these potential scenarios. And in order to do it, modularizing your content and then having a componentized content management system that can kind of weave together a bunch of little components into a deliverable on demand for you based on some criteria that the user would either supply through telling the system, or it could be by us monitoring your behavior, or maybe there's some information in your profile. All those things come together to provide a great information experience. And I feel like we're at the cusp of doing it right. And this whole movement toward artificial intelligence has gotten people interested in content, but it's still a big roadblock for lots of companies.
That wraps up part 1 of my interview with Scott Abel. Please join us next week for part 2. Scott and I will be talking more about technical communication in product design. Be sure to visit qualityduringdesign.com and search for Scott Abel, and you'll get all the extra links and notes from this episode. This has been a production of Dini Enterprises. Thanks for listening.